women of color are not getting support consistently from the time that they're young to the time that they're getting into the workplace. It's not an independent, oh, there's not something in, in the office or in the schools. It's literally starts at home and in the community. And if you don't really have that solid support throughout, that's why you see, some of the things of like women either getting funneled out before getting into a tech career, or get there, there's no support, and then they just leave altogether.
Welcome to Great Tech Pros. I'm Wylie Blanchard. Today's guest is a technical specialist for a leading Fortune 50 company. She is fiercely committed to increasing the participation of women and people of color in science, technology, engineering, and mathematic fields. A career mentor for the Pathways in Technology, a college high school initiative, and a volunteer workshop technical assistant for Black Girls Code, which is a nonprofit that empowers girls of color to develop in-demand IT skills and prepare them for advanced careers in technology. The award-winning author of Women of Color in Tech, a blueprint for inspiring and mentoring the next generation of technology innovators, Susanne Tedrick. Welcome to the show, Susanne.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here today.
Welcome. Susanne, tell the audience something about yourself that maybe we don't know yet.
I have a lot of interesting facts about myself. So I actually ran both the New York and Chicago marathons on behalf of different nonprofit organizations. There will not be a third marathon run after that. I also have a Class 3 forklift license, so for a vision-guided vehicle. So it's a vision-guided vehicle is where there's almost no kind of manual interaction. It's just literally circuits and computers driving the navigation. And so apparently you have to get a special license for that. And I can proudly say that if I ever need to drive a vision-guided vehicle again, I am legally allowed to do so.
Well, that is unique. Well, let's get right into it.
Sure.
Women of Color in Tech, what prompted you to write this book?
So the book is in large part based on my experiences transitioning into the technology arena. Prior to where I work now, I worked in financial services in a number of different administrative and operations roles. So I have very little technical experience and almost no formal training. And so a lot of it was just formal and informal education, doing networking, volunteer work, hackathons, I mean, you name it, I just committed to doing it so that I can build that skill, and it eventually led me to where I am now. And so the book is to help people who are in similar situations who, want to get into tech, but they don't really know where that is, and they don't really have the understanding of what it takes to perhaps get to those places. So we talk about the different variety of tech careers that are available. How do you get there? And then talking very candidly about the things that unfortunately women of color deal with in certain situations. So it's in large part that I wanted to help others and save them maybe some grief and some drama or some sleepless nights.
So the book is really focused on women of color and their experiences getting into technology, as well as some advice on how to address those challenges that they may have. In addition, as well as to how to shine in a world that's dominated by a different demographic. Can you share a few challenges that women of color may experience right now in technology?
Yeah, I would hope that it would be a short list, but unfortunately, it can be a pretty long one. But I'll highlight the things that tend to come up. The first is microaggressions. So it's not necessarily someone coming out and saying derogatory things to you in a very direct way. it's those little subtle things that are said and done that, kind of like a slow drip from a faucet. Like eventually, if it keeps dripping, it's going to wear away you. And I get it, unfortunately, all the time when I talk to certain audiences and they hear me talk and they hear me speak. The common thing is either you're so articulate or, oh, I didn't realize that you knew that. I'm like, well, I'm not a complete, dummy. Like, I would like to think that, if I were someone else, that you would think I was just as smart. So like that tends to come up, unfortunately. Being the only or the few is also a challenge. I'm lucky in that I'm in a team that sees my value and they see me as Susanne, the professional, and nothing more. But, it can be lonely, because you can't have certain conversations. There's certain things that you just don't feel comfortable saying. And you just kind of save that for your own tribe, so to speak. And then unfortunately, there's just being a woman in the industry. So you've got that double whammy of being a person of color and then being a woman, and men sometimes not feeling as if you could be on par with where they are on a technical level. One of the things that I hear that like frustrates me to no end is when women go into a chart, like a technical discussion, and the first thing they say is, I'm not technical, or I'm not technical enough. And I'm like, you don't know how much harm you're doing by saying something like that, because it's like you're already doubting your own ability and you're giving credence to those people who don't believe in you. So those are the main things that I tend to encounter fairly often. Yeah.
I can definitely see those challenges. I've worked in technology for a number of years, and I can definitely say often I'm the only person of color in a room of technical professionals, in many cases. But when I'm on a large team, there's typically very few women, and when there are women, often more than not, at least in my experience, they're not women of color. Um, with your statement about entering trying to penetrate the market. What are the different ways we can try to penetrate a market, or women of color can penetrate the market when it is male dominated, and dominated by people who are not of color?
Yeah, so I feel like there's two sides to this question. So what is in our control is, bringing light to what opportunities exist, and, us being professionals in the field, like really supporting people who have that spark, that have that want, and really being there for them. So if it's mentoring, if it's referring them to jobs, if it's giving them information, we as professionals that are already out there, we should be doing all that we can to help future generations to get into there and help the pipeline. Because part of the reason why a pipeline issue exists is that women of color are not getting support consistently from the time that they're young to the time that they're getting into the workplace. It's not an independent, oh, there's not something in the office or in the schools. It's literally starts at home and in the community. And if you don't really have that solid support throughout, that's why you see some of the things of like women either getting funneled out before getting into a tech career, or get there's no support, and then they just leave altogether. So I think it's that responsibility that we have to each other. On the other hand, and I think larger responsibility actually lies with employers. And I do think that they need to perhaps look at diversity and inclusion as not nice to have, but a requirement in order for you to be a competitive business. One of the studies that I always cite is the 2018 McKinsey and Company study that literally put it in black and white terms that companies that invest, and I mean when I say invest, like meaningfully invest in diversity and inclusion, more often than not made more money than companies that didn't make that same contribution. And I know that for some people, they feel like it's not my problem, or like we're getting along just fine. I'm like, it's a business imperative as far as I'm concerned. And the more that managers start taking it upon themselves to look at it that way, I think the better off they will be for it.
Any additional advice for males who are already working in technology on what they can do to ensure that women and women of color have, more inclusion inside of technology fields?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it brings up the topic that I am really adamant about, and that's allyship. And allyship to me is not a one and done thing, or putting something on social media and saying I'm in support of such and such. I mean, allyship really means using your resources, your privileges, your platform to really help advance the career of someone who perhaps has been historically marginalized. And it does mean sometimes being uncomfortable and having uncomfortable conversations with people. So I would say for male allies, obviously, like, you have empathy, which is important in being an ally, but where there are areas where you know that you can perhaps make a difference, like let's say someone makes a sexist remark, or if someone makes a racist remark, like chiming in and saying, hey, this is something, that's not right, this is not okay. Or if you're noticing certain patterns when it comes to biases in recruiting, which is also an issue, speaking up and really using your platform to help others. I know it can be challenging, and I know it can be scary, but I do think that the only way that we're going to be able to increase the pipeline and deal with these issues is if we start having some very hard, candid conversations with one another and moving forward.
If I'm new to technology, let's assume I'm new, and I'm thinking about starting a career in that field, what type of advice would you give someone who's thinking about starting to work in technology?
Yeah, so I kind of put my advice into three particular areas. So the first is just having an understanding of what's out there, like really being curious and exploring the different opportunities and options that are available. Some of the things that I encounter when I mentor students is that when they think tech, they think specifically software development and engineering, and that you need to go into computer science. And while that is a path, that's not the only way that you can, get in. There's several different things and areas that you can get in. So it's important to get an understanding of what's out there, and then where your skills and interests currently lie, and where you're going to find that intersection. The second is having that very honest assessment about where your skill set is right now, and what you excel at, and where you might have to develop a little more. Once you have an understanding of where your deficiencies may be, it's really going out there and saying, okay, well, how do I get that experience? How do I brush up on that skill? Making sure that you're, really thinking about how you're going to plug in the holes, while at the same time selling the things that are great about you already to employers. And then just going out and demonstrating what value means. So, we talk about resumes and LinkedIn, but I do think it's important that, you find other ways to show how you stand apart. So if that's online portfolios, if that's speaking, if that's writing, anything that gets people to make them aware of the value that you bring and what you can bring to them is incredibly important, and something that you should start sooner rather than later.
You know, one of the things I really like about the book is that you give a good synopsis of what the current tech space looks like right now. You go into, different career options, what that means, salary expectations within those careers, what are the value adds in those careers. Can you share just a few career options that one may have in today's market?
Sure. So some of the things that I highlighted were, for instance, project management. Project management is a little more akin to, let's say, a more business-focused profession. Nonetheless, it does require you to have an understanding of how technology firms run, as well as some of the technological challenges that companies are facing. So really having both business and that technical piece is incredibly important if you're going into a technical project management field. Then you have data science. If you're someone that loves data, loves numbers, trying to find insights and creating a story from what data is telling you, data science is a wonderful field to get into. And considering that we produce so many like bytes and terabytes and gigabytes of data every second, businesses are looking for those people that love doing that sort of thing and can really give them insights that they can act on. And user experience design, which was, I think about it as perhaps my next career, because it's really focusing on how do I make products and services that my end users will delight in and really, use and think fondly of, but understanding that the business itself also has some needs that have to be met. The key thing with user experience design is you are not your user. You really do have to put yourself in the position of the end user, but you also have deadlines, you have budgetary constraints, other things that you need to be thinking about. So these are just some of the options. There's so many more. And then thinking a little bit more broadly, there's positions outside of what's called the FANG companies. So that's Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google, and Amazon. These companies are, when you think about tech jobs, are that you primarily think, okay, that's where I want to go. But there is a need everywhere. There's no industry that isn't touched by technology. So for instance, Bank of America is actually one of the top tech employers out there, as well as the New York Times and Nike. So just thinking a little bit more broadly about what a tech career can look like, and those options is incredibly important.
And right now, you're a technical specialist, I believe a cloud technical specialist. What does that entail?
Yeah, so for my position, I try to help both enterprise development teams and IT teams understand the benefits of cloud computing, and more specifically, what that means to them. So for many companies, they have existing architecture and legacy systems, sitting on old servers, and they're thinking about, well, I hear so much about the cloud. What could that mean to me? How could I save money? How can I be more agile? How can I be more flexible? So my job is to go in and talk to those companies, understand where they are now, where they'd like to be, and then from both a technical and business perspective, how do we get them there? How do we design a solution that will get them to their ideal state?
One of the pieces I liked about your book was that you talked about mentoring, which you mentioned earlier, but you also talked about coaching and sponsorship. And I find that a lot of people don't really know the difference between the three. Can you elaborate for me what's the difference between a coach versus a mentor versus a sponsor, and how women of color can utilize them to advance their
Yeah.
careers?
Yeah. So I think for our women of color, you're going to need those three at some point in your, well, throughout your career, and for different reasons. So for me, coaching is you're focusing on a very specific skill. You're focusing on, like, let's say, improving your proficiency in a particular program or something of the like, and you're working on it on a very fixed frame. And you can have a relationship with your coach, obviously, um, but it's very narrow in definition for your relationship. A mentor is a little different in that, while yes, you have a goal in mind, it's a little bit more all-encompassing, and can be a little bit more informal, than a coaching relationship. So if you're someone that's thinking about going into project management, the mentor will talk about, okay, well, these are some of the tangible skills that you'll need to have, but also, like, start thinking about, um, how you want to start networking with other people, or these are the industry trends that you need to be familiar with. And they constantly, well, good mentors hold you accountable, for your goals, and they challenge you. Um, and you'll probably have multiple mentors throughout, the course of your career, as you should. And for me, sponsorship is a little different. I consider, like, a sponsor, like, as a mentor on steroids, because they're the people that will usually use their position, their authority, their resources to really be an advocate for you to move to the next level, whatever that is. And if they don't think you're ready to move to the next level, they will tell you why, and be very candid. And sponsorship is not something that's given, it's earned over time. Like, you develop that relationship, and it's really important to build that relationship first, because the sponsor is kind of putting themselves out on the line for you. Like, they're using their social capital, their reputation, and they want to be sure that the person that they're advocating for, is someone that they definitely see as someone that is worth, whatever risks that come with doing that. So again, they're very different, and I know that for some people they're kind of used interchangeably, but that's usually how I view the relationships.
I work as a mentor and sometimes as a coach in many different aspects. I'm curious though, from that sponsorship level, let's say I have a sponsor, someone has a sponsor, and they're given direct feedback that maybe they don't have the right technical skills to move to the next level, and there's some room for improvement. What do you think are the most relevant technical certifications or technical trainings or technical experiences that one can gain to help close skill gaps that can help them get to that next level?
Yeah, that's an important conversation to have. So I'll start by saying, for certifications, um, for people who are just starting out, I would usually recommend the CompTIA IT Fundamentals certification. The reason I would say that is it gives you what I think is the necessary knowledge you need to have for any technical career that you decide to go in. Like, you need to understand how computers, how tablets, how they work, understanding databases, understanding security, understanding computer networking. I think that's a given regardless of where you land. And it will just speak to your credibility and your dedication to becoming a tech professional. So just starting out. For certifications after that, it really is going to depend on where you're trying to land in your career. So let's say computer networking is something that you're interested in. You might want to pursue the Network Plus certification, or the CCNA, Network Associate certification from Cisco. If you're interested in cybersecurity, there's the CISSP or the CISA or Security Plus. If cloud computing is something that you're interested in, all of the major cloud platform providers like IBM, Microsoft, Amazon all have entry-level cloud certifications that you can take. So it definitely depends on where you're trying to go. And I think one of the best ways that you can get a gauge of that is by talking to people who are already kind of in the role and doing it, and asking them quite candidly, like, what do you think of this certification? Is it worth the money? Is it worth the effort? Backing off of that, I think certifications are a very important part of your story, but they shouldn't be the only one. And when we're talking about skills and experiences, anytime where you can find opportunities to apply the knowledge, that you're learning in a real world practical way, will always carry a little bit more weight in certain situations. So speaking for myself, when I was in school and I was learning certain things, the job that I was in really didn't give me the opportunity to kind of apply what I was doing. So to get around that, I actually pursued volunteer opportunities where I said, hey, I've learned everything I need to know about web design and technical writing, and I see that you have a need, for those things. Would you be comfortable with me, doing that for you? And so, well, obviously it wasn't paid. You always want to get paid, but when you're trying to make the skill building exercise, anything that you can do where you're bringing value to people and you can demonstrate that, always speaks volumes to employers versus certifications. Now, for some jobs, you need it. For some jobs, some employers want that. They don't even want to have a discussion unless, you have the certification. But most employers that I've encountered really want to see, it's great that you learned this, but how did you apply this to the real world? So that I don't think that it's purely academic.
In that, you talked about if something's going to be worth the money. You also talked about getting paid. Everyone wants to get paid. So let's talk about getting paid.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about salary negotiation, and I'm curious, what's your thoughts about how one can negotiate their salary and tactics and methods in which they can utilize to get the best or the most money possible when they're walking into a new role?
Absolutely. So first piece of advice, regardless of if this is entry level or your 10th job, always negotiate your salary whenever possible. Like, don't leave money on the table, because you don't think about it until much later in life where you're like, I should have asked for more money where it was necessary. So always, always, always ask, regardless of where you are in your career. In terms of negotiation tactics and skills, the first thing I tell people is that whether we innately realize it or not, we actually do have our own negotiation skills. We just didn't realize that it can be applied in other places. Like the time you ask your parents for something or your significant other for something, you usually barter or trade. You've already engaged in some form of negotiation in your life. Now it's just the point of kind of honing, refining that skill a little bit. I usually mention resources like the American University Women's Association. They host a free training course that for anyone to take on salary negotiation, how to learn about that. There's also some resources from Ladies Get Paid, which is specifically made for women who are historically less in most positions. So there's those opportunities there. But in terms of things that you can do and think about now, the best way to prepare is do as much research about the position in question. There are a lot of salary surveys out there that give you an understanding of what you can dictate in terms of the position, the amount of experience you have, as well as taking into account geographic areas. So always look at salary surveys. Whenever possible, if there are people in your network that can give you that information, always ask. I know that there's a sensitivity for some people around sharing that salary information, but some people are willing to share it. So, definitely seek them out, and make sure that you're always documenting your worth. Like if you've, developed, programs, if you've done, even if you've done volunteer work, it's all experience that talks to, the professional that you are and the value that you've brought to these organizations. You can use those things as ammunition when you're going into the negotiation table, and they're just like, well, I don't know, like, well, I've done this, 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 and this. So I think that that's in line with what's going to, what you should be paying me. So research, do your due diligence, and always be confident going in that, you deserve to be paid what you're worth, not I'm lucky to have a job.
I'm glad you said that we should, do these things, especially like things like documenting the work that you have in your worth. I found that a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the work that we do on a daily basis typically impacts a company's bottom line. And we should be going out of our way to make sure we understand exactly how our daily role impacts the corporate bottom line or the company's bottom line, or how it helps our bosses meet their objectives. Another one I like to tell people to do, and I want your thought on it, is documenting numbers, statistics. And that, in my opinion, that's going to help them really clarify how they've impacted a bottom line or how they've impacted the business. And when I say statistics, I'm thinking, how many people are utilizing a piece of software that you've built? How much money has been saved in the last year for implementation from the department? How much money has been generated, come into the company based on a software that you were part of the team in developing. A lot of people don't think about that, and those numbers have value, because I think that many senior leaders are really looking at those numbers, those statistics, when they're evaluating someone's worth. Have you seen that in the market? And any thoughts on how numbers and those statistics help impact bottom lines?
Yes, absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. Usually, when I work with students or other people with their resumes, I always tell them to position their statements as action, result, impact. Because of my actions, this was my result, and this was the ultimate impact that it had. That speaks more volumes than, like you can talk about being results oriented, but for an employer, they're like, well, what does that mean? And anytime that you can put numbers and quantify something and really like put it in hard data, most managers respond more to that than kind of the more fuzzy qualitative statements that, like, yes, this is true about you, but it doesn't give me a sense of what you brought to the table. And I understand that for some positions, it's hard to kind of quantify, and you just don't know. But I always tell people, wherever possible, use numbers to demonstrate your impact, and really drive home the result and impact portions of the things that you're doing, because that counts more than anything. I think employers want to know that if I'm going to invest all of this money and time, I want to know that this is someone that can, really, do things, that can really come in and take charge and do what they need to do, versus someone that's going to come in and just kind of take a very laid back or reactive approach to the job.
Susanne, before I go into audience Q&A, I do want to ask one more question. Let's say someone's an introvert and they're not confident interacting with people. I grew up as an introvert as a kid, and I had to work very hard to force myself out of my lack of interacting with large groups or individuals. What can introverts do to help them prepare for interacting with people and potentially even clients? Because I know some technical roles require you to interact with clients.
Yes, Excellent question. So I'm an introvert as well. And I have to say, like, that was for the job that I was doing, it was definitely like very, very difficult to kind of get into that mindset of, okay, you need to talk to people now, and not have like a deer in the headlights kind of look. I For introverts, I feel your pain, and I know it's hard. I would say for any client roles or any networking that you have to do, I would say, focus on one-on-one relationships first. Like, don't feel like you always have to be the smartest person, the loudest person in the room, and then you have to shake hands with everybody. Stick to just trying to formulate one-on-one relationships with people. Understand what your limits are. I'm a person where after a heavy like client interaction day or heavy networking meetings, I need a day or two to just kind of like recharge. And so that if that's playing video games or taking a walk outside in the park, I take that time to do it, and I don't force myself to, do it when I don't feel like good and well. So definitely making sure that you're taking that time to have self-care is very important. And I would also say, like, if you can control the situations that you're in, having situations where there's an activity at the center versus just straight talking, I think is also very helpful, because when you're focusing on an activity or working together, it kind of takes the onus off that you have to be the person doing the presentation, or having to do the heavy burden of carrying on a conversation. So wherever possible, if you can do like a design thinking workshop where you're all formulating the answers to a question together, or doing a volunteer opportunity together. Just finding other activities that don't rely on you to have to be the center of attention, I think, is very helpful.
Excellent, thank you. So Susanne, that's all the time I have with you for one-on-one. For our audience, I do want to remind you that Suzanne's new book is called Women of Color in Tech. One moment. Women of Color in Tech, a blueprint for inspiring and mentoring the next generation of technology innovators. You can find that book at every major book retailer, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Wylie.com. You can also visit Suzanne's website, which is SusanneTedrick.com. That's spelled SusanneTedrick.com, or WeBelongInTech.com, WeBelongIntech.com. Also want to encourage you to buy that book directly from a major book retailer and not from a third-party seller. If you buy the book from a third-party seller, that does not guarantee that that purchase is going to be counted as a purchase that's going to benefit the author. If you buy from one of the major book retailers, or go directly to Suzanne's website and buy from one of the retailers listed there, that ensures that it's going to benefit the author of that book. Suzanne, any last remarks that you want to give people before we jump into the next segment?
Well, just to say thank you so much for being here this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to get to talk with people and to share and to help. And I would just say that if you're thinking of a tech career, or you don't know where to start, please pursue it. And I'm happy to be a resource well after this call if needed.
That's our time with today's guest. If you enjoyed today's content, be sure to subscribe. Your support ensures that we can bring you additional great technology professionals who are passionate about helping you become a great tech pro who's in high demand.